Right, ahead of this big leadership debate on the BBC tonight between Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak, we are now going to talk about the debates turning increasingly bitter. On Sunday, the two clashed over immigration, with both launching plans to protect Britain's borders.
Liz Truss, she promised to sign up more Rwanda-style schemes with African countries. Well, Rishi Sunak's policy, he vowed to cap the number of migrants who are able to enter the UK.
So today, the focus is expected to be on the NHS, and that story we mentioned to you just a minute ago, after this damning Commons Committee report talks about how the health service is facing its worst ever staffing crisis.
Well, joining us now to find out more, Kat Neelan, Senior UK Political Editor at Insider, and also the Consultant Editor of the Daily Mail, Andrew Pearce, are both in the studio with us. Andrew, let's start with you. We have seen so much debate over policy, but tonight it will come down to personality, won't it?
Yeah, which won't be great for Liz Truss because she has many qualities, but she's not endowed and blessed with the greatest charisma. Can we put it like that?
Au contraire, my friend. She appeared on this show last week. Yeah. And people loved her. They loved her.
I'm backing her for the leadership because I think she's experienced. She's been around a long time. She's got lots of ideas. But she is a bit wooden, to say the least. And Rishi Sunak, in my view, very polished, too polished. You can be too polished, I think.
Yeah.
So it would be the first. I hope tonight is a proper constructive debate and they don't engage in mudslinging, because we don't want that. We want a proper debate about the direction of this government, where we're going now. They've been in power for 12 years. They need to reinvent themselves, reheat, and so we'll see what happens.
Kat, is there anything coming out which Andrew's saying, reinvent themselves, giving us a direction, whether it's one or the other? How would government look under them?
Well, so far we've had a lot of sort of improvements being made to things that have already been announced, policies being built on from before. I think the China stuff that we're seeing today is probably the newest. But I kind of question the timing of that, because I think, you know, concerns about China are kind of quite well sort of trodden within Parliament. There's a lot of Conservative MPs that have expressed concern about China for a long time. But I do wonder, now that we're at the sort of Tory member stage of the race, whether that's really the right direction they should be going.
You're talking about the Tory member stage, but the wider public are looking at this, I think, with fatigue already, and we've got weeks of this to come.
We have, and I think fatigue in a sense of being observers and not having any kind of control over it, because at the end of the day, it is going to be just a few thousand people voting for it. But ultimately, you know, the test will come in a couple of years' time when we do have a general election, and if things aren't sorted out by then, you know, we're talking about the kind of chaos at Dover, people wanting to get away for their holidays, and then looking ahead to the autumn when we're looking at really kind of tough times. This is the kind of point at which people will be looking and making decisions about who they're going to vote for in 2023, 2024.
Andrew, the Dover situation, the backlog, the border controls, our viewers and listeners are very much of the opinion that it's revenge for Brexit.
Look, there's no doubt they've not forgiven us, the French. They just haven't. Macron can't bear it. And there were always checks coming in and out of France because we were outside the Schengen Agreement. Those checks are now being enforced much more rigorously. They're taking 2 minutes, whereas before it would just show your passport. But also, there simply weren't enough staff on the French side. There's plenty of booths, but they're empty. And I think it is partly revenge for Brexit. And we've just got to knuckle down and get on with it.
But you see, I don't really see who this benefits. I mean, yes, revenge is sweet and all that, but, you know, it's in the French interest to have that trade, to have that boost to their economy. And why don't we just get tough with the French coming into the UK?
Well, that's what we should do. I would. Apply the same rules. And then when the queues start there, Macron is an impotent president now because they've had an election for the French. He's won the presidential election, but the French Parliament has gone socialist and right-wing. He's got no power, so we could inflict quite a blow on him. But I think he's a spiteful president, if that's the right word. And he really hates Brexit. He hated Boris Johnson, so he's glad Boris is going. He won't like Liz Truss very much either. Another reason to vote for her.
Well, let's talk about spite, because tonight, Kat, both the candidates will go head-to-head for the first time, and the debates so far have been pretty bruising for the Conservative Party as a whole. Rishi Sunak accused of being too slick. What might we see from him tonight in a sort of maybe slick, maybe spiteful way to try and say to the Conservative Party, look, for some reason I'm behind in the polls, but take me seriously?
I can't see him dropping the slick persona. I don't know about you, Andrew, but that's his selling point, right? His competency is the main USP that he's bringing. I do wonder whether some of the sort of attacks will be more done at arm's length. We've seen quite a lot of nasty briefing over the last few days, but because of the sort of attacks that they did on each other at the actual debate were then used and packaged up by Labour. They were used by Keir Starmer during PMQs and done as an attack ad by the party itself. I wonder whether we might see slightly less vitriol in person.
I think that's right, and it should be, because it was. I mean, those broadcasts when there were 5 candidates slugging it out, they're mad to have agreed to it in the first place.
Yeah,
particularly with Channel 4. Yeah, and particularly with Channel 4 audience, which was always going to be packed full of lefties.
It's interesting you both talk about Rishi Sunak being slick. I mean, could I talk? I don't think he's slick. I think he's rehearsed, is what I would call him. Yeah. Bob Monkhouse was slick.
Yeah,
he was a genius, you know what I mean, at being smarmy and whatever. I just think...
So far, a lot of the debate has been on his turf, right? It's been about the economy, so it's stuff that he knows really, really well. If it then shifts to foreign policy, you might see him coming unstuck a bit, because that's obviously not a brief that he's ever held.
Well, listening to this conversation is Peter Vaughan, a GBNews viewer and listener from Stourbridge and Worcestershire. And Peter, former teacher, but also Rishi Sunak supporter. So how are you feeling going into the debate tonight? Rishi's got quite a lot of ground to catch up on, particularly what we see from the polls. He's not gaining support like he is from you.
Well, I think Rishi Sunak is a bit like a racehorse on the rails coming up to the finish. I think he's going to attract a lot more viewers and supporters, and I think he's going to win. I just think Rishi Sunak is clearly ahead on the economic field. When you look at his background, I mean, he got a first from Oxford, he's a Fulbright scholar at Stanford. He's worked at Goldman Sachs. I agree with Andrew Pearce that Liz Truss isn't up to the character that Richie has. She is a little bit wooden. She doesn't have quite his charisma and his background in economics. And I was watching James Cleverly this morning, and he was saying that Liz Truss is very, very consistent. Well, I disagree. I mean, she was an ardent Remainer some years ago, and she was in the SDP, and some of the comments that she made about Brexit in those days were very vociferous and dead against, and I don't think that shows somebody who's very consistent. So yes, I'm a Rishi Sunak man. I think he's going to come on strongly. I think it is a good move to bring his family, his daughters, his wife into the picture, whereas on the other side we don't see Liz Truss's children and her husband. I wonder why that is. I think Richie is going to win this, and I think he's going to win it well, because I think the vast bulk of people, especially Conservatives in the constituencies, I think those people are going to warm to him, and they're going to realise that he does have the edge by a considerable margin.
I would say it's quite interesting to bring his wife into the picture, Rishi Sunak, because she, until a few weeks ago, was a non-dom. She was not paying her taxes here. And when it was exposed that she was a non-dom, they quickly changed her status within 3 days. And that also reminds us that Rishi Sunak, until October, had a green card. He was keeping his options open in case he wanted to make his life in the United States. And we shouldn't forget, it's interesting as what our viewer just said there.
Peter.
He's put to say to Peter, this guy's put our taxes up to the highest level since the Second World War. What's great about that? That's not very Conservative.
He had got a pandemic to deal with and furlough.
Yes, but, you know, things are changing, and I think there are big questions to be asked. I'm still not convinced that Liz Truss is quite right on the economy. I think we are at risk of having this kind of stagflation.
But do they, Kat, give me an insight here, right? So she can be good on lots of things. Does she not just have to have the big idea or principle, but she's got advisors all around her who says, this is what we're doing, and she'll go, oh, that sounds like a good idea, that sounds like a bad idea. Are the brains not elsewhere for this?
To it, right? You can't just sort of cherry pick things. There's got to be a sort of overarching package. What kind of Conservative is she? And so far we're seeing that she is sort of leaning more towards the Boris Johnson type Conservative. However, with the kind of low tax stuff that she's trying to bring out, you kind of wonder, really, is that going to appeal to the people in the red wall that kind of voted for a better sort of investment in our services, which are at really kind of danger point? You know, we see what's happening with the NHS right now. That's only going to get worse if you start cutting the tax.
How on earth has that been allowed to happen? That's just criminal, actually, that is.
I mean, you mentioned the NHS, but why is the NHS and the cost of living not front and centre of the debate tonight? Instead of, I mean, China, of course, important.
I agree, it ought to be. Bread and butter issues are what will win the next general election for the Conservatives or Labour. It's not going to be whose most hawkish on China. It's who's got a solution to the cost of living crisis, who can make sure waiting lists start falling. And, of course, Truss has to explain, if she's going to get rid of those national insurance rises, which I think she should, that money it was going to raise was going to go towards NHS waiting lists. So where's the money going to come from to tackle NHS waiting lists? She has to explain that tonight.
Yeah. Peter, those are the harsh realities of economics. There's a lot of the membership. There's a petition of 10,000 Tory members who want Boris Johnson put back on the ballot paper with these two. Would you be one of them?
No, I certainly wouldn't. I think the premiership of Boris Johnson in the last 2 years has been absolutely appalling. And I consider him to have been a bad Prime Minister. And it's just a shame, really, that in the last few months, they've had to prize him out of Downing Street with a JCB. I'm not a Boris Johnson man, and I think talk of him coming back is absolutely ridiculous.
Okay. Thank you, Peter. Thank you for that.
The damage that's been wrought to the Conservative Party, Andrew, is surely vast.
They'll get over this. Look, this happened before. We've replaced Tory leaders in mid-term. They have a leadership election. There's a lot of mudslinging. There's a lot of debate. Actually, some of it is rather good because we can see where the Conservative Party is going to go. They'll get behind the new leader. They'll unite. And don't forget...
Will they?
Yeah, they will.
After
they will.
all of this, we're going to see the 5th of September, both sides.
They will, because the Conservatives have a great instinct. It's called survival. And they will want to survive, and they want to win the next election, so they'll unite. And remember, they're up against a useless, boring Labour leader called Keir Starmer. He's boring.
I mean, that's undeniable, but, you know, after the kind of rocky, sort of dramatic few years that people have had, maybe there's more of an appetite for boring leadership than there has been for a while. I actually think we're probably in the sort of brown kind of era of this government. You know, we're kind of in the last couple of years the sort of dying embers of the Conservative government. I agree, Keir Starmer is not a strong opposition leader, but I think the way that the Conservative government is kind of imploding and sort of flinging mud in such a public sphere, I think will have long-term repercussions.
Kat, is there an appetite? We were talking to one viewer today about an alternative party, something she felt that there was no political party who represents her.
We've done this dance so many times, haven't we? I mean, I can't remember all the iterations of the sort of remaining sort of groups that kind of, you know, where MPs from the Tories...
Change UK.
Yes, we can't remember them all.
Change UK lasted 5 minutes.
And not one of them got re-elected. So, you know, I mean... People do talk about this from time to time. Our system does not favour it, really.
Okay. But it's Nigel Farage. I'd be interested to see how he feels, see how this election pans out, because he wants to see that we get Brexit sorted out, and it's not being sorted at the moment. So is Truss more likely to?
Andrew Pearce, consultant editor of the Daily Mail. Kat Neelan, who's the senior UK political editor of The Insider. Thank you both very much indeed. Appreciate it.
Nice to see you.
Thank you.